want to take our conversation worldwide. I want to hear from you, Secretary Pompeo, as we have the reports now that President Trump is, I guess, it's on the books. It's been scheduled. He's going to be meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska. This is going to happen on Friday as of now. And the president said, again, kind of, I'd say, another interesting one of those. Usually it's, we'll know within a day. President Trump this time says, we'll probably know in the first 2 minutes of whether we're going to have a deal or not. Your experience with Vladimir Putin and the Russian government, does that seem pretty accurate?
Both my experience with Vladimir Putin and the Russian government and my experience with President Trump. Look, my take is it will be something that in pretty short order the two of them can figure out if there are irreconcilable problems or if there is a pathway forward. I hope that President Trump has applied enough leverage. I hope Putin doesn't stiff President Trump. That will end badly for Russia. I hope that in the end, Putin recognizes that he's got to bring this thing to an end. He's got to call a wrap on this thing. There is a path forward that I think everyone can accept. You know, I've seen the Ukrainians, the Europeans, everybody stating their maximalist position. I'm convinced there is a pathway towards a resolution where you can get the ceasefire that President Trump has been seeking and provide security to Europe for another 25 years. Europe will have to lead. We'll have to be part of it in the sense that we will have to be the mediator for the outcome. But make no mistake about it, President Trump is going there with the intention of determining whether Vladimir Putin is serious or whether he's just going to continue to string us along.
Well, and even the fact that this dialogue or this summit is happening is something novel for this entire war. With the war beginning under President Biden, President Biden never picked up the phone once to call the leader of Russia to say,
with pride,
right. The only thing we got was a very stern don't or no in the media from the previous president. But so we're now here. We are before this summit leading up. This is a step that at least there's talking between the United States and Russia. But if it doesn't lend itself to a ceasefire at this point, what other steps and options do you think the Trump administration has after this meeting if they aren't able to reach that ceasefire or some sort of step forward agreement?
Look, you captured this perfectly. You're right. Why would Putin have met with President Biden, for goodness sake? There would have been no utility in it. He was continuing to march. He was continuing to take more of Europe. And President Biden was doing nearly nothing to slow him down. There was no risk to Vladimir Putin. When President Trump came into office, it was clear that there was a new sheriff in town, that things had changed. And so, look, if they walk away from this meeting on Friday with no advancement, no conclusion, President Trump will continue down the path that he has already set in motion, which is increasing pressure on the Russian economy, lower energy prices, secondary sanctions on those who are still fueling the Russian economy, allowing him to continue to murder innocent Ukrainians. I'm confident that's the path President Trump will head down, and it won't surprise me at all, as it won't surprise you. After this summer, President Trump will make very clear, here's what happened, here's my plan, and here's how we're going to bring this to its logical conclusion.
Well, you even bring up some of those, the sanctions, as well as the way that President Trump views the way to deal with the Russians in this, even things like tariffs on India, who is a major trading partner with Russia, being able to put pressure points in other parts of the world to say, hey, stop buying their oil and gas. And that's another angle of pressure that he can put on them. It's not just the straightforward, here's the sanctions here, and we're sending arms there. The administration now is thinking globally, how can we put this pressure on this regime in Russia and able to get them to come to the table? And I felt like it was very black and white with the previous administration of, we have to send arms here and we have to put sanctions here. But now that there's a more holistic approach, it seems like that is actually what is getting the Russians to at least the talking phase.
Undoubtedly true. You have to remember the context as well. I think you've nailed it. The context is a president who has demonstrated his willingness to do things that are unconventional, right? The strike in Iran, supporting the Israeli efforts against the regime there in Iran to slow them down from expanding their nuclear capabilities. The recognition that in Syria we're going to have a fundamentally different approach. That hurts the Russians. People forget that it was the Russians propping up Assad for so long, but now the Russians, of course, aren't the right ally to have. And of course, the president's pressure on the Chinese Communist Party too, who has also fueled this Russian war. It is a much more strategic, much more holistic approach, much more pressure being felt by Putin and his regime than there was, 6, 8, 10 months ago. This creates the conditions for a ceasefire and the ultimate resolution. We'll see if Putin's reached that point or not on Friday.
Yeah, we'll keep kind of everyone updated on that situation, but I kind of want to pop around the world here a little bit. Secretary Pompeo, obviously, the war in Gaza has taken some very interesting turns over the last few weeks. But there's actually a report that came out of the BBC that said Hamas has a secret war chest of hundreds of millions of dollars. What do you think about the validity of that? How do these reports seem like they just get ignored? Because obviously, if that's true, and they have this war chest being funded by who knows, this war could go on for a lot longer than many people hope.
My sense is that the Israeli leadership, not just Prime Minister Netanyahu, but broadly the Israeli leadership has concluded it's go time. We have 50 hostages, 20 of whom we believe are still alive. Let's go get them. Let's go take control. Let's bring this to a conclusion in Gaza as quickly as we can. You know, we often talk about Hamas being diminished. That is absolutely true. We talk about Iran as having been diminished. That's absolutely true. But you win wars by defeating adversaries. And I think what they're going to do in Gaza is they're going to go defeat Hamas in its entirety. I don't know how much money they have. I know Hamas has way too much money because the Biden administration didn't enforce the sanctions regime that we had done in the first Trump administration, creating enormous wealth for the Iranians that was transferred to Hezbollah and the Houthis and to Hamas. I don't know how much money they have. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, with the Americans in support, is going to go finish this, bring this to a conclusion, and then deliver a government to the people that live in Gaza that is justifiable and decent, not controlled by Iran, not controlled by the terrorist Hamas.
All right, let's move again. Once again, you have a new article on aclj.org called "A Free and Independent Taiwan is Critical to American Security." Again, with most of the eyes of the world on the United States, on Gaza, on Ukraine and Russia, on Israel. What is the President Trump can be doing to make sure and why, I guess, for our audience to get engaged? Of course, you wrote a blog on it. Everyone can go read that blog. But why is Taiwan, why is this so important right now?
Taiwan sits at the fulcrum of Chinese aggression, and the Chinese Communist Party is here inside our country. They are the strategic adversary for us for the next couple of decades, and Taiwan sits at the very front line of that. And the Taiwanese just simply need us to deliver on the weapon systems they've already purchased from us. They need our diplomatic and intelligence support. And then they need us to continue to do the work to push back against the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda efforts as well. When we do that, America will be better off. Not only do we depend on Taiwan for important electronics and semiconductors, but we need a safe, free, open Pacific so that goods can transfer across the world, Americans can travel, and we are a Pacific nation. I grew up in Southern California. We're a Pacific nation, and we can't let the Chinese Communist Party begin to control the South China Sea or the area around Taiwan in a way that treats it as its own lake. It's not good for America. We've never allowed this. I'm confident President Trump's not going to allow that to happen.
And I think people need to know this, Secretary Pompeo, as we wrap up this segment, is, there's the America first and all those kind of talking points you hear. That doesn't mean that the world is closed. It doesn't mean other countries aren't working while you decide to become more of an isolationist. At some point, we have to be looking at what's happening around the world. We can take care of our own first, but then also keep an eye of what's going on. That's why we have the European Center. It's why we have the ACLJ in Jerusalem. It's why we have all these ones we can't talk about even, because it's important to keep a worldwide perspective. We do not live in some world where it takes days and days to travel. We can get to the other side of the world in the course of 24 hours or less. And I think that is very important.
Yeah. Look, President Trump has been characterized by some as an isolationist. I didn't see that. He's an America first guy. He believes deeply if we put America first, that means American global leadership. Good things will happen for the American people. You see it with his tariffs and trade agreements. Right, they're trade agreements. We're going to trade with these countries, not shut them out. Right. He just wants it to be fair and balanced, and that's the right outcome for America, and the one that President Trump has already delivered on in just his first 6 months.